Hey everyone, welcome back to the Business Immigration Benchmark. I'm your host, Laura Blanairs. I understand we've gained some new listeners, so welcome and thanks for tuning in. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm Laura Blanairs. I am a corporate immigration attorney at WR Immigration. I've been practicing corporate immigration law for over 10 years. In my decade of experience, I've led and managed varying companies in different industries with different priorities in their programs. That's all to say that I have a diverse experience. And my goal is to bring my experience and insights to this podcast to share with our HR and global mobility listeners. My goal is to share actionable insights for these professionals to support them in driving decisions for their organization and help them support their careers. So welcome to the Business Immigration Benchmark for those of you just joining, and welcome back for our listeners who've been with us. This episode will be a little bit different than our previous episodes. I will be sailing the ship mostly with some cameos from our producer, Freynolds. He'll be popping in to liven it up with some Q&A for us. This week, I want to spend some time talking through my thoughts and recommendations for how corporate immigration teams can manage budget constraints. So I think we're in an era of cost containment for program management, and I want to dive into, some of the factors and some of the solutions in this cost containment era of program management. So we'll walk through that, and then we'll also walk through some scenarios. So we're hoping that in these hypotheticals, you can gain some insights into perhaps your program and how to think about some of the challenges your program might be facing. And we'll wrap with some Q&A with some technical questions related to this topic. But really quickly, before we jump into today's episode, please follow the Business Immigration Benchmark on Spotify or subscribe to WR Immigration on YouTube so you can get notified every Monday when we release a new episode. I also recommend listeners follow WR Immigration on LinkedIn so you can be catching all the content my colleagues from WR Immigration are hosting and conversations they're leading on that platform. Also, if you have any questions about today's episode, the best way to get a hold of me is to DM me on LinkedIn. If you've got any topic suggestions or questions, you can email my producer. His email is in the show notes. So with that, let's get started on today's topic. So program management in the era of cost containment. I want to kick things off here by laying out the factors I think are sort of causing or creating the environment we're operating with budget constraints in 2024, and call out some of the forces that are making cost containment harder for our HR and global mobility leaders. And then I'm going to offer some insights into the solutions that programs can be thinking about in driving their policy or protocol to rein in some of the program fees that they may be facing or need to, because that's maybe how their program is measured. I should start here by noting that not all programs are facing cost containment or budget constraints. I have many clients who are growing in their industry, growing market share. So their immigration programs are humming along and growing because they are hiring and they're looking to hire the best and brightest in the world. So we're seeing growth in some industries, so not all across the board, but the reality for many programs they are faced with some budgetary constraints and looking to rein in employee benefits. The immigration sponsorship, relocation, expat assignments all sit within the employee benefit category. And so some of our HR and global mobility leads are being tasked with reining in those benefits and reining in the overall spend. And whatever the reason may be, they're looking to improve on sort of total dollar spend in this area. And I won't speculate on all the reasons, but that is a pressure that these teams are facing. And some of these teams may have had layoffs, whether within the HR space or the company globally, and they're being asked to do more with less. And that is a challenge within this industry currently. Another factor is, a big obvious one, USCIS government filing fees are increasing. So, the fee that we've recently see implemented is the premium processing fee. That one went into effect February 26th. The premium processing fee increased from $2,500 to $2,805. That's the premium processing fee our clients are most often using for H-1B transfers or I-140 premium processing. So not only has the fee gone up, but the government also made the premium processing service more lengthy. So you may have been used to receiving answers from the government through premium processing in 15 calendar days, and that's going up to 15 business days in the H-1B context. So not only are you being asked to pay more, you're also receiving a slower service. So that's a tough pill to swallow. The other and more impactful fee increase is that almost all USCIS-based filing fees in the employment-based space and practically the family-based space are increasing effective April 1st. So not only are we seeing significant fee increases in the base filing fees go into effect April 1st, companies are also going to see a new program fee. The government added an asylum program fee to all non-immigrant visa filings. So any sponsorship of work permits, so to speak, the H-1B, the TN, O-1, L-1, the common classifications for employers to sponsor, they're being asked to also pay a $600 asylum program fee. So some significant increases. The best way to describe the impact of these filing fee increases is to give you an example. And I'm going to walk through an example of an H-1B transfer for a company that has more than 25 employees. So this is how the USCIS dictates which filing fees apply based on the number of total employees a company employs. So a company who employs more than 25 foreign nationals who is filing an H-1B transfer today before filing fees go into effect is going to pay $4,980, so just shy of $5,000 in government filing fees to file an H-1B transfer. That includes premium processing, because with an H-1B transfer, you're almost always going to want to be filing with premium processing. Now, the new filing fee under the April 1st fee increases, an employer is going to see a filing fee of $6,185. So the percentage increase in fees is approximately 24%, which is significant. Now, I know some other corporate immigration providers out there are conducting surveys on how companies are planning to approach the filing fee increases. If they release those results and their methodology publicly, I would love to analyze and work through the results of their survey, so long as the survey methodology is sound and the data is reliable. WR will be conducting our own survey on this topic in May after the USCIS fee increases are well into effect and companies have had some time to grapple with the new filing fees. Given the filing fee increases will have already gone into effect, we think we'll get some interesting feedback once companies have been working through those fee increases, and we'll be able to get some data on how those corporate immigration programs are approaching cost containment in 2024. So stay tuned on that. Driving into, we've talked about the factors playing into this cost containment emphasis. What are some solutions you can roll out or think about for your company? And the big picture answer is it's going to depend from company to company, right? The solutions are going to be tailored based on your company culture, where you sit in the business cycle, and what makes sense for your employees. Because I think the previous cycle of program management and previous program priorities were employee experience. And that was the topic at all of the industry conferences, is how to improve employee experience. And that was how a lot of our HR partners and global mobility leads were being measured. So now we've got to balance employee experience in an era where we're also being asked to manage budgets and rein in expenditures. And so those can kind of be at odds, but not always. So what we really want to think about is just to maintain your current population. So if you're a company that did experience layoffs, just to maintain and stabilize your program, it's going to cost you more because of these filing fee increases. So with that, my first thought is you're going to want to engage with your CHRO, with your CFO to give reliable forecasts based on these new filing fees. And, to give you an example, I gave you an example of an H-1B transfer, but an example of a first H-1B extension for a company with more than 25 employees, the old fee, just the filing fees without premium processing, was just shy of $2,000, $1,980. Now that filing fee is $2,880, and that percentage increase in government fees is approximately 45%. So maintaining your population is going to be significantly more expensive to file with the government. So projecting those fees and just knowing and having that conversation with your financial department within your company is going to be your sort of first step. As far as an active solution, I think the first thing I would be thinking through would be, is your company prepared or able to start doing H-1B online filings? I say this because this could be, an easy internal action for the company to start exploring. USCIS, in its fee increases April 1st, is also offering the opportunity for companies to file these H-1B petitions online. And if you file your petition online, the government will give you a $50 discount. And so, while not initially may not move the needle, if you think about the idea that you're not FedExing the paper package to USCIS anymore, I think you'll want to look to partner with your counsel. Most firms, and all the firms that I've worked at and continue to work at, will have an admin fee that is meant to cover the FedEx, the copying, the printing fees. But if you're not submitting a paper filing anymore, at least one FedEx goes away, and that you're not printing or copying any documents because you're submitting everything electronically. So I think partnering with your counsel to see what and how they can reduce that admin fee for you if you move to online filing. So you've got a couple discounts coupled up: the government giving you the $50 discount, and then your partnering counsel cutting you a deal, hopefully with their admin fee, given the reduction in FedEx and copying fees. Another thing I think we might see, or you might consider as your program lead, is driving to RFP. So it's an easy answer, I think, to sort of look to legal fees. Can we reduce our legal fees? And it's always good to go out to market, check in to make sure your current partnership is a right fit and for the right price. I think it can get a little tricky, and you want to be really cognizant of, if you're looking to drive fees down, are you getting the same services that you're accustomed to and that your program needs? So when you are driving an RFP for fees, you might receive less support. And so if you've had an internal team cut, you might need to rely on outside counsel for strategy, for program review. If you've got a strong internal team, and that team will be in place and is stabilized, maybe a sort of ad hoc services support is the right fit and leaves you with a sort of lower legal bill. So I think we might see some RFP traction in 2024 in light of a cost containment era. The last solution I'll pose here is there room for policy updates? So I bet within an organization that is looking to rein in costs, they're reining in other benefits or other ad hoc programs that they were spending on. And this might be a good time to be partnering with your leadership within the company to understand what are the priorities for the next, short term, for the long term, and does our immigration sponsorship policies match where we're headed? So you can be thinking through, premium processing benefits. Is that something you want to continue to offer? Have you been offering that to employees? Have you been covering dependents, so spouse and children extension? So you're sponsoring your employee to maintain work authorization to work for your company. Are you also paying for those sort of dependent extensions? Are you also paying for a spousal work permit if the spouse doesn't work for your company? Is that something the company wants to continue to support in the future? When you think about revising the policy, you want to do so carefully. You want to do so with good change management and communication to handle rolling into that new policy. Another creative solution here, this one might not work for all programs. For TN, L, E, programs that sponsor a lot of those classifications, you might look to consular applications to avoid USCIS filing fees altogether. I think in the COVID era, and even today in the post-COVID era, we've been filing a ton of USCIS filings because for many years we weren't able to travel during COVID or there was restrictions. And so we were encouraging our programs were looking to ensure processing safely and conservatively for their employees. So they weren't sending folks outside to extend some of these statuses. But with the filing fees going up so significantly, I think you can efficiently be managing, travel in a way that maybe you didn't want to before because of travel restrictions. From a cost perspective, this could make a lot of sense because a round trip would be, round trip ticket abroad will likely be cheaper for many of these extensions. So that requires a lot of more long-term planning. So something to consider and maybe build into that policy as you're reviewing updated policies and protocols. Okay, so next I want to run through a few scenarios. My producer, Finn Reynolds, is going to pop in and run through a scenario we've developed. My hope is that if you're listening, at least one of these scenarios will resonate with your program and some challenges that your program is facing, and that the suggestions I provide will offer some direction on how to solve your company's unique business problems. These scenarios are inspired by a couple real-world companies and organizations, but we've changed up a few details to keep the inspiration of these scenarios anonymous.
Okay, Laura. So the first scenario is a director of U.S. immigration at a large multinational manufacturing company, which we'll call GizmoWorks International, had 6 members of her internal corporate immigration team, but one left the company at the end of 2023, and another was let go in a rift that took place in January. So she's lost 2 folks. GizmoWorks has about 1,500 foreign nationals in the U.S., but 40 of them were part of the rift that took place back in January. Most of the foreign national employees are on an H-1B visa or an F-1 OPT or STEM OPT status. The remaining foreign national employees are on the alphabet soup of other U.S. visas, but the H-1B remains the main driver of the corporate program. The company expects to file upwards of 400 H-1B petitions in 2024 after all of the fee increases go into effect in April. And that covers H-1B transfers, extensions, amendments, change of status cases, and the H-1B cap. Following the rift, the leadership at GizmoWorks has emphasized that a top priority in 2024 across all departments is to keep the spending limited to just the essentials. However, they haven't given any specific expectations for budget cuts for the U.S. immigration program. What guidance would you offer the director of U.S. immigration at GizmoWorks International to ensure she's keeping costs limited in 2024?
Yeah, it sounds like a common problem clients are facing these days with this sort of a generic task to sort of rein in fees. Let's see a lower budget. And in an era, like we said, where USCIS filing fees are only going up, this is a difficult task for this individual. So I think the first thing I would be considering, especially with an H-1B dominant program, is, premium processing considerations. So we're obviously going to keep H-1B transfers in a premium processing context. We're definitely going to continue to premium process those transfers because that is the fastest way to onboard. The company could also think about onboarding H-1B transfers with receipt notices. Now, while the company can adopt that policy because of portability and it is compliant, the foreign national employees that are looking to onboard may not want to onboard with just a receipt notice. So that is the main reason why we want to keep premium processing, so we can secure the approval for that foreign national employee to feel comfortable onboarding in a timely fashion. But we can look at whether it is necessary for the company program to premium process H-1B extensions. If we're working with counsel to timely file H-1B extensions, there's a limited need for H-1B extensions to be premium processed. This is a cost that can be pushed to foreign national employees. The company is not required to pay for the premium processing benefit. Now, if this company, GizmoWorks, requires its employees to travel, that may be a reason to continue to keep premium processing. But with enough planning and support from counsel, this is an easy change to move from premium processing extensions to regular processing. Of course, with a change in policy, we'll want to be communicating to foreign nationals well in advance, setting a deadline of when the last premium processing extension will go out, and then updating the policy consistently. This company is going to be filing a ton of H-1B cap petitions once it receives the lottery results come April 1st. We'll want to be considering which cases require premium processing and which don't. So generally, at least last filing season, we saw H-1B cap petitions filed with regular process approved and adjudicated within a very reasonable 2.5 months time period. So they're being approved well in advance of the October 1st start date. So you'll want to plan which cases require premium processing. And again, cases only require premium processing if the employee has some required travel. So you'll really want to look at is GizmoWorks requiring international travel for its employees? And that if we're not premium processing H-1B petitions, how are you communicating and offering for the foreign national to pay the premium processing fee should they want to upgrade their petition with counsel? And whatever the decision is, we just want to make sure that the company is communicating transparently, effectively, and as soon as possible if this is a change in policy for GizmoWorks before rolling it out.
Great. The second scenario is an immigration consultant is the only person on her company's internal corporate immigration team at a company that we'll call Defense AI. The company has grown rapidly in the last 6 months, given its innovative platform in the AI and cybersecurity space, and its U.S. corporate immigration program has followed suit, with an unknown amount of growth expected to continue throughout 2024. The immigration consultant is experienced in the field and has helped run other programs in the past. She's been so busy with the day-to-day work at Defense AI that she's had very little time to establish program sponsorship policies and forecast budgets. She's now getting some pushback from her CHRO and CFO on costs, and they're requesting more regular budget forecasts for the program. What is your diagnosis for the challenges that this immigration consultant is facing? And what recommendations do you have for her to balance her heavy day-to-day workload with providing regular budget updates to her higher-ups?
Yeah, this is a good one. And I love working with clients like this. And when they're going from, a startup to expansive growth stage, we find a lot of the small companies are in sort of this no policy stage, that they're really just, there's someone in HR wearing multiple hats. They don't have a built out global mobility. This immigration consultant, obviously very experienced, knows there needs to be a policy, but is, struggling to sort of put that together. But that really needs to be prioritized, because you need a policy in which to have a framework to then project a budget, right? Like if you don't know what your company supports or doesn't support, it's going to be really difficult to have any reliable projections. So that's sort of the first key piece to answering the CHRO and CFO's answer on costs. And I suspect that's just what they're looking for, that they're just looking for some sort of understanding. Again, depending on the type of business they are, they might need that for future investment. They might need that for, just projected growth and how to support that growth. So it might not be a pressure so much as to contain the cost as it is to just understand what the costs are and rein in just an understanding and a way to work with them. So often these types of companies are, looking to recruit the best and brightest. So they're going to have a pretty comprehensive, robust, generous package. And you'll look at that policy in line with their recruitment policies, along with their sort of general company culture. You want to make sure all of those align when you're developing the company policy for immigration sponsorship. The request, like I said, coming from the CHRO and CFO, it sounds like just having reliable budget forecasts rather than the cost containment, but also asking the question, what's the goal here? How frequently do they want to receive those reports? And how are they being measured when the immigration consultant is supporting this request? The other thing to think about with a highly successful AI company with this kind of explosive growth, they probably have some extraordinary ability employees working there. And that I say that because you'll want to build out a sponsorship policy in the green card aspect that supports perhaps national interest waiver or extraordinary ability, or if the company qualifies, maybe even outstanding researchers. And so prioritizing those types of processes for a company that's uniquely situated like this to, avoid the lengthy labor market test perm process. Not only is the perm process long, it can be more expensive, especially if you're recruiting in markets with high recruitment costs like Silicon Valley. So that's all to say that by developing a robust sponsorship policy in the green card space and analyzing the employee's eligibility for viable national interest waiver EB1, you can actually have a more cost-effective program and your employees will end up being much happier.
All right, next one. A company that we'll call Wonder Cure Global is a publicly traded company that has approximately 904 national employees. The company is an international drug research and manufacturing operation. And traditionally, the policies of its corporate immigration program have skewed very conservative to avoid taking any risk in compliance or immigration filings. They acquire companies regularly, often 1 to 2 per year. But following acquisitions, there are often layoffs because of redundancies in roles, meaning that the HR department and global mobility team are often managing 1 to 2 RIFs per year as well. The global mobility team has 3 team members focused on the U.S. immigration program. And an important KPI for this team is cost reduction. And that KPI is emphasized more than ever before in 2024 by their higher ups. If you're consulting this program and they came to you with the limited information that I just laid out, what questions would you have for their team and what initial strategies would you recommend for them to meet their company's KPIs on cost containment?
Yeah, this one's got a lot of fun issues baked into it where they're growing and then contracting. And I'd wonder if we can, based on this pattern, if we can understand, are they acquiring companies at similar times of year? And, what's the timeline in when they acquire a new company to have that sort of HR project team work through the sort of layoff analysis? And I say that because, that'll sort of tee up how we manage perhaps their perm program, which could be really difficult in light of regular layoffs. If this program is laying off workers on a regular cadence, that could really drive a perm program to its knees in the sense that it might stop. So we would want to have a good understanding of if there's any patterns in the timeline for these layoffs, given their robust M&A. Is the M&A closing at certain times of year? I know a lot of deals close year end. And so then that sort of sets off a cycle in the new year for potential layoffs. So just getting an understanding of when those layoffs happen to manage the other pieces of their sponsorship programs. And, if perm is becoming more difficult because of the trends in layoff to, the contractions, we might look to explore unique pathways for sponsorship like national interest waiver, outstanding researcher, extraordinary ability, and having the sponsorship policy, offer where the company supports these EB1 or national interest waiver petitions, but maybe passes the cost over to the foreign nationals. So if the company has already sunk costs into a sponsorship for an employee, but perm is continuing to delay given the business cycles, that maybe this program opens up the availability of signing off on a national interest waiver petition and supporting the foreign national employee in that way, but maybe not financially. And so thinking through that, and if you're updating the policy, communicating that effectively and being very careful with how you roll that out. The other thing, when you've got a situation where there is layoffs and there's sort of known that this is sort of the cycle of the company, creating a working group and communication pipeline from the HR team that's tasked with reviewing redundancies after M&A to Immigration Counsel. Often Immigration Counsel or global mobility professionals are kind of the last to know when these terminations are happening. And they have such a devastating effect on the immigration program, not to mention foreign nationals themselves. So creating some sort of communication pipeline to get as much lead time as possible. Because again, if a perm is, being ready to be filed, we want to make sure that's filed before the layoffs actually occur to save fees. So those need to work together for cost containment. Otherwise, the company is going to be repeating recruitment efforts or things like that, which will end up, increasing their budgets.
All right. And last scenario here. It's a bit of a long one, so bear with me. In February, an ambitious global mobility professional with over 10 years of experience joined a Fortune 500 financial firm that we'll call Barron Lawrence Bank as the new head of U.S. immigration. The firm has one of the largest corporate immigration programs in the U.S. with over 3,500 foreign national employees. She works underneath the VP of Global Immigration and Mobility, who oversees both the company's U.S. program and very large programs in EMEA, APAC, and LATAM. Unfortunately, the circumstances with which this new head of U.S. immigration is joining Barron Lawrence Bank will make the first few months of her role a bit tricky. Her predecessor left the company suddenly last December after several contentious interactions with the VP of Global Immigration and Mobility, and half of the program's U.S. immigration team left alongside this individual. On top of that, numerous high-priority immigration cases were recently mishandled by the long-standing immigration law firm that Barron Lawrence Bank has worked with. That means that the new head of U.S. immigration is tasked with rebuilding the internal immigration team and fielding an upcoming RFP for the company to select a new immigration law firm to work with. Like other Fortune 500 firms in 2024, Barron Lawrence Bank is prioritizing cost containment this year. If the new head of U.S. immigration reached out to you to ask for advice on a path forward for rebuilding the internal team, selecting a new immigration law firm to service the company's needs, and prioritize both projects with cost containment front of mind, how would you consult her?
I mean, this sounds like a charged situation. The first thing I think about with team members departing, cases mishandled, rebuilding a program are insanely tough challenges to tackle. I think my first recommendation for this new head is to kind of be on like a listening tour to interview remaining team members, managing counsel, and production attorneys at their legal team, and also the foreign nationals, because you want to get a sense of like what's going right, if there are any remaining pieces going right, what's going wrong, and why. Because just changing counsel doesn't mean that those underlying systemic problems are going to go away. It could be how the internal Barron Lawrence Bank team is partnering with counsel. So even if you sub in new team, it's not going to alleviate any of the challenges or cases being mishandled. And so you're going to want to go on a listening tour. You're relatively new. So, I think the assumption is I'm going to come in and change everything and it's going to be great, where that's not always, that's a really knee-jerk reaction. So go on a listening tour here, find out, from different perspectives what's going on, and be open to all possibilities. From there, I think you want to set up goals, right? So you're going to be hearing probably consistent terminology of what's needed, what's missing, and set up the short-term and long-term goals so that you can, measure your success. You're new. You want to show higher ups if you're progressing and why, or if you're not progressing, what's holding you back, to sort of create the internal company resources that you need to get on track. You don't want to be entirely reactive. So your goals will be to be responsive. You got to build trust and integrity for the program. So those things might take some time. And then I think you also want to find out from leadership is how is cost containment measured? So this is something that we're working with and partnering with our clients. It's, how is that measured? How are your KPIs measured? Is it by outside legal spend? Is that how you're measured, and keeping legal spend down? Is it entire program spend, meaning, in-house resources are counted? So does that mean reshaping your team and the resources you use and how you use them? Is cost containment measured by employee spend, meaning, the benefits given to the employee through U.S. government filing fees, dependent fees covered, legal fees to support that employee and their sponsorship benefits? And then how does employee experience factor in? Because we talked a little bit about earlier in a prior example where, if you're being asked to reduce fees, can it come at the expense of how that employee is experiencing the sponsorship or HR program? Because likely the answer is no, that they, your leadership wants employees to have the same premium experience, but for a discount. So how are you going to achieve that, and being realistic with whether that goal can be realistically achieved with your leadership? So selecting new counsel and cost containment can go hand in hand. The first instinct may be to seek legal discounts. But I think you got to be careful of legal discounts because you want to understand what's included in the legal fees when you're going to RFP or negotiating with your counsel, to understand what's in scope and what's out of scope. Because what you might find is you have an initial sticker price that's significantly discounted, only to find that you're paying additional fees for any additional support that your program might need. So you want to be mindful of, if you've got a really strong internal program, which it sounds like this one's a little bit shaky. If you go to a cost cutting type of arrangement with your counsel, you might not need the support that you need to rebuild your program, or maybe it is what you need. So just be mindful of what's in scope, what's out of scope. One thing I'm not seeing in RFP requests, but would love to, is if programs like Barron Lawrence gave details on their docket and requested budget projections. So if they gave me an active, reliable docket review, I would love to respond in an RFP to give you a budget projection, and then measure that budget projection against, other firms, in the sense that, like, what will my 2024 or 2025 budget look like if we work with this firm versus that firm? Because I think you'd get a better understanding of what would be included in that year of legal services. So that's an interesting way to sort of think about it. So I'm all for creative approaches in thinking through cost containment, but you got to be asking the right questions to make sure you're reaching the company and the program goals. Okay, and to wrap up here, Finn's going to pop in some rapid fire questions. These are questions I've received from HR colleagues, clients of mine. So we're going to sort of pop in quick rapid fire answers here to wrap us up.
Okay, first question. In a Form I-140 context, can an employee pay the $600 asylum program fee?
So yeah, this is the new program fee rolling out from the government April 1st. And that, yes, USCIS was silent on this. Regulations are silent on this. It's not clear how USCIS can actually charge this fee, but the employee can pay this fee.
Okay, next one. And this is from the point of view of an HR, immigration, or global mobility team. Here's the question. If an employee is opting to pay the premium processing fee that our policy does not cover, does our company have to pay and then request reimbursement from the employee?
No, if a company is working with counsel, we actually recommend that counsel set up the payment directly for the employee to pay counsel. In the olden days when we're filing paper filings, which, we're moving into online filings, the employee could just cut a check and I could put that on top of the petition. But in the era of, paying these fees online, the counsel can just pay, employee can just pay counsel directly. So there doesn't need to be any sort of reimbursement from company to employee. That can get a little hairy.
All right. Next one. Can the company require an employee to cover or claw back H-1B legal and filing fees if an employee departs the company quickly after onboarding, or in some cases never joins?
So generally, I counsel my clients to stay away from trying to recoup in situations like this. More concretely, this is a state law question, and therefore enforcing any kind of liquidated damages claims should be reviewed and advised by your company's employment counsel. So generally, no, but if this is something you want to explore, you're going to want to talk to your employment counsel.
All right. And last one. Does an employer have to sponsor the STEM EAD extension for an employee?
So shortly, no. The employer is responsible and subject to the terms of the STEM training plan, which requires company information, company certification, E-Verify participation, confirmation of student evaluation, among other things. But the employer is not required to pay the filing fee for the employment authorization document. So some final thoughts on this topic. I think cost containment is a challenge for U.S. immigration programs. And I think it becomes a challenge because leadership at these companies and organizations are still prioritizing employee engagement. So for our HR and global mobility professionals, you've got your work cut out for you looking to do more with less, and make sure you're leaning on and partnering with counsel to come up with some creative solutions so you can continue to deliver a thoughtful and beneficiary or employee-centric program and meet your budget constraints. So with that, I'll say goodbye until next week. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please follow the Business Immigration Benchmark on Spotify or subscribe to WR Immigration on YouTube so you can get notified when our episodes are released every Monday. Like I said at the beginning, if you have any questions about today's episode, the best way to get in touch with me is through sending me a DM on LinkedIn. You can suggest topics or questions for me to answer on the podcast by shooting my producer a note. His email, again, is in the show notes. I'll leave it there. Thanks to everyone. See you next week.